Okay.
Okay. Awesome. So that sets the scene, gives me a bit of an idea of what I'm working with here. I'm really looking forward to the rest of this conversation. I think it's going to be great. So the very first part that we're going to start with is kind of macro market opportunities. Like I said, we start really broad and we kind of chisel our way towards the end of the interview where we're going to be very specifically dealing with a Halo brand. So we start broad, go narrow. So market opportunities, we're going to talk a lot about global and local trends. Then we're going to chat about tech advancements, regulatory and socioeconomic factors. So that's kind of all we want to cover in this first piece. So off the bat, to open up the floor with a real nice, big, juicy, wide question, what do you think are the biggest opportunities in the global payments landscape?
So
let's start with.
So I mean, if I zoom myself, sorry, I'm getting like a weird echo. Let me, if you could maybe mute, Vaynant. So if I look very far into the future, and it's hard to say how far in, but if I look at the end, like the end, you know, where what will be like almost a completely different view of what we see today, if I go to that kind of extreme, because obviously, like as we move away, you know, you can say, well, in a year we might see this, and in a year we might see this, and in a year, and it's like, yes, but where are we going, right? So if I go right to that end point, I see from a payments perspective, it's an interesting one. Definitely this thing called decentralized becoming like reality. So what does decentralized mean, right? So decentralized means, so today we can think of banking as it's highly centralized, right? So think about it. Everyone in South Africa has got a bank account with like one of 5 banks. Maybe it's 10 banks, I don't know. But it's basically, I'd say 80% is with one of 5 banks, right? And so these banks are centralized entities, right? And so maybe there's 5 of them, that's great. So it's not monopolistic, 100%. I'm not saying it's a monopoly, but it's certainly centralized, right? And it means all these payments are flowing through these organizations. And then when you even roll that up a bit, you can say, well, how do banks connect to each other? So how do banks talk to other banks? And it's like, oh, okay, so in South Africa, it's something called the Payments Association of South Africa, PASA. And underneath that, there's like one entity that interconnects the banks. So actually, as you zoom out, you go, oh, it seems like there's 5 or 10 banks, fine. But actually, when you look underneath it, there's actually one. There's one entity called the Payments Association of South Africa. They have a service provider called BankServe. They are the single payments provider in South Africa. I suppose we also have the Reserve Bank, right? So it does the actual like treasury side of it. So like when you zoom out, it's highly centralized. Like there's no disputing the fact that banking is highly centralized, right? The same thing is true of credit card. So if you pull out your credit card today, and I could pull out mine, we'll have like one of 2 logos on it, right? It will say Visa or MasterCard, right? So you zoom out with credit card, it's like it's centralized. Either you are a Visa card holder or MasterCard card holder. Those are the 2 networks that are that dominate payments globally, right? So with that in mind, that's how things are today. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It works, right? And we have faith in Visa and MasterCard. And we have faith in our banks. And we have faith in our regulators to make sure that like payments are well governed and are safe and secure. Because technically, what you're doing with banking is you and I as individuals are we're externalizing our trust, right? So we say, actually, like I don't have faith that I can keep my own money, right? If your employer paid you in bags of cash every day, you would go, shit, eventually you have quite a lot of cash lying around, and it's like it's not practical, right? And people can steal it from you. So cash, not great. So we agree, and we say, well, how do we solve that? Well, banks are good. So it's like I don't trust myself to store my money because like I can't physically do it well. And so can I trust this organization called Standard Bank or Nedbank or Investec or whatever I want to call them to look after my funds, right? And so at some point as an individual, I have to say, well, actually, I'm externalizing my trust. Like it's my money, but I'm okay to give it to these other people. And I'm okay with the system that is going to potentially look after my money. And if it gets stolen, like hopefully I've got some claim back, right? So when we think about, and so centralization is good in that sense, right? But it's not universally true, right? If I trust Standard Bank, it doesn't necessarily mean that some guy in China trusts Standard Bank, right? Like my trust is very localized. if I think about that, right? So me as a South African, yes, living in Johannesburg or Cape Town, I'm aware of the brand Standard Bank. I have built up a trust over years. Potentially my parents have instilled some trust in this brand with me, and I go, fine, I'm happy with it. But some random guy sitting in China is going to go like, not a chance. Am I going to? I don't know who Standard Bank is. I don't know who Nedbank is. Like my bank is called China Construction Bank or China Union Pay or something, right? It's a different, and so where I'm sitting and I look at China Union Pay, I go, I don't know if I trust that. Like, so trust is very localized. Agree. And the problem there is so when in this world, and I'm talking like very philosophically here, but you did ask a good question, so I'm going to go through my thought process on it. So when we think about this kind of ecosystem, I've got a bank in South Africa and I've got a bank in China. Do these guys trust each other? So I want to make a payment between Tom and some guy sitting in China. Like, it's quite a tricky problem, actually. So first of all, I don't trust the guy in China, right? The guy in China doesn't trust my bank. He trusts his own bank. Does China Union, China Construction Bank, does it trust Standard Bank? And then you start to say, well, maybe it does. And maybe it's because they interconnect through some payments network, right, called SWIFT, or through Visa or MasterCard, right? So through those things, we can start to say, oh, because as we move up our trust chain, eventually we get to the top and we say, oh, well, we're going to use Visa. Visa actually is the ultimate foundation of trust, right? Visa trusts China Union Pay or China Construction Bank, and Visa trusts Standard Bank. So therefore, if we use that, we kind of can therefore like figure out trust between Tom and some guy in China, right? Does that kind of make sense? So when I make a payment, I just go, I don't care who China Union pays, doesn't matter. As long as it goes over this rail, I'm cool with that, right? And so that's like one interesting way of solving this trust problem. So there's another way of solving it, which is much more difficult, but much more interesting, which is, can we build a way of going between two untrusted parties? Can we build a way of moving value between them in a way where they absolutely don't trust each other, but they can trust something that they can equally define in the middle, right? And without all these like layers of rubbish of Standard Bank, SWIFT, Visa, whatever, all of these, like, because it's high friction, right? So as money moves over this network between South Africa and China, everyone's got to take a little bit out of it. They've all got to take a few percentage out of it. And so at the end of the day, we've got trust, yes, fundamentally, but it costs us maybe 10% or 5%. And so it's like, oh, that kind of sucks. But like, okay, the 5% is because we didn't trust each other. Got it, right? Because if I did trust him, I could have probably just posted him a bag of money, and said, there we go. We trust each other. In fact, 0%, friction. Or you could come to my house and I'd hand him that bag and say, there you go, right? Or I'd give him a block of gold or something. There would be no friction. If we trusted each other, there's no friction. But when you have two parties that trust, you don't need that third intermediary. So anyway, I'm trying to paint a picture of something. And so when I look forward into the future, I start to say, actually, I think that whole model of trust is something that we are starting to understand, that we can start to like break that down to something more interesting and start to say, okay, this trust is still a problem, but the way we've solved it in the past is a very high friction, high investment, very centralized way. There is technologies today, and it starts with like cryptocurrency, absolutely. So something like Bitcoin from 2009 and today is starting to say, actually, there's more liquid ways of transferring currency which requires no intermediary, right? So I can send you a Bitcoin directly without there being any intermediary between us, right? And I can do this electronically. So you no longer have to come to my house, and I no longer have to give you a piece of gold, right? But we still have to have trust in each other, right? I'm not going to just send you a Bitcoin and hope that whatever you're giving me, like I'm buying your car or buying a phone or I'm subscribing to your service or whatever it is. I still don't have that connection of like, I can give you money, but like, where's my value? Like, what is the thing you're giving to me, right? And it's like, well, that's outside of Bitcoin. Like, Bitcoin doesn't solve the problem on the delivery of the service, right? Does that make sense? So it's a way of, yes, moving. I can give you money, but it's like, but I wanted to give you money based on the fact that we had an agreement that you would give me Netflix for a month. Do you know what I mean? or that you would cut my hair, or that you would wash my car, or you know what I mean? There's no agreement between us. It's disconnected. You've got these, and this is true of all payments, right? Today. So when you pay for something, it's like I have a different way. I give you money down one channel and you give me service down another channel. Even at Woolworths, right? I've got my goods that I want to buy. It's all in this bag. And it's like, I want to buy this bag, and it's like, okay, so that's you receiving the goods, but then I'm going to pay you some sort of credit card thing. It's like they're not connected, right? At the end of the day, okay, fine, I get a little slip that says you bought these things and it cost you that much and you paid by a credit card. Okay, so the piece of paper maybe connects those two things, but it's like it's not that tangible. Obviously, in the physical world, it's weird, but like imagine it was for Netflix, for example. So I subscribe to Netflix. It costs $100 a month. Imagine that as I was receiving Netflix second by second, I was at that time paying you the value that I've subscribed second by second in the reverse flow, right? So if I think about like subscription service, so Netflix is month by month, right? So we got 760 hours a month, I think. Imagine we had a contract that said for every hour you are a subscriber to Netflix, I would like to be paid 15 cents, per hour of that subscription. And we had a vehicle that we could put together between us that is like inside this thing is the Netflix content as well as the value that I'm willing to pay you every month. And that contract that we put together delivers me Netflix and delivers you money because you're Netflix, right? You know what I mean? And we can look at this thing together. So I don't know who you are, and I don't trust that you're Netflix necessarily, but we can both of us look at this contract and we can say, yes, the way I read this looks good. The way you read this looks good. So you and I can both inspect this thing, and if we know that it's total, if it is one atomic thing, we can both agree that it is correct between us. So without me trusting you, we can both agree that this thing between us is correct and valid, and we can both enter into that agreement, right? And so this is like this is the fundamental blockchain model. Actually, this is where cryptocurrencies is taking us, the ability to create contracts between individuals or between parties where we put value into them, but we also put services into them and conditions and other things, and then we can all agree on it. And that contract actually runs independent of any state actor, any organization. It literally runs autonomously, doing what it was told to do without anyone having control or ownership of that thing. Do you know what I mean? And that is like, for me, is like a very fundamental thing to say, okay, so now if we have a world where we are starting to transact in this way, what are banks for? What are banks going to do in this world? Because in fact, we don't really need them now. We now have this other mechanism, which effectively is our way of outsourcing trust. We used to outsource trust to banks. Now we can outsource them to a technology which is effectively perfect. It is perfect. And it cannot be manipulated, and so we can externalize our trust in this other thing. So like, well, then what do banks do? What do the payment networks do? And that's for me a very interesting question, because I think if we fast forward, I don't know, 20 years into the future, or 100 years into the future, or I don't know, 2 years into the future, I don't know, but when this thing takes off, it's like that is going to be very disruptive.
Yeah.
So that is my view of payments.
Okay, cool. Nice short answer. I like that. There's a lot to chew on there. I immediately have a follow-up question, but I want to comment on what you now said here at the end. What are banks for? What are they going to be for? I think it was Bill Gates. His quote is, banking will always be a necessity, but banks won't be. So what banks do will always be important, but banks are not always going to be the ones doing that in the future. Protecting my money, facilitating transactions, etc., etc.
100%. And so you should stop saying banking, actually, because it's not banking. It's the facilitation of financial transactions. Actually, not even financial. It's the facilitation of transactions, which could themselves have other pieces in them. It's not just about money. It's about connecting it to what that money is meant to do, right? So like if you think of your employment contract, right? Just think of any contract. You've signed an employment contract. In that thing, in that piece of paper, it brings together the two worlds. It says, we want you, Wynand, to perform the following duties every month. We expect these services to be rendered, right? And those are non-financial. Those are like, you do your thing, you will arrive at work, you will dress, whatever they are. You will not fucking you will abide by confidentiality. Those are non-financial things, right, in that contract. But then, of course, in that contract is also, we will pay you X per month. So it's like, oh, we've brought the two worlds. We've brought that is a transaction. A transaction has got a good or service as well as a financial remuneration scheme attached, right? So interestingly, banks, so think about banks. Do they broker transactions or do they broker financial transactions? They broker only the financial ones, right? They know nothing of your employment agreement. They just know, hey, some company pays you into your bank account every month. We can assume that this is your employment agreement, but we have no oversight of to how is that governed? What are your responsibilities? What services are you rendering? You know what I mean? They actually have they have removed themselves from the transactional world, because the transaction is not just money. It's like it's half money and half something else, right? It's the other part and so for me, what this distributed economy, or the decentralized economy is trying to say, let's get into that. Actually, let's try to understand the other side of the transaction, not just the financial side. And if we can govern that in an autonomous, trust-free way, that is highly disruptive, and that actually becomes the financial mechanism. That is the new internet, if you think about it. That is the new internet. We can build a whole new internet which is based on transactions, which have, yes, potentially a financial side, but also a services or product side to it. So you can imagine into the future, I could be browsing Amazon.com, and instead of paying with a credit card, I actually just pay with a transaction that is between me and Amazon directly. And inside that thing captures the fact that they will only be paid once that product is delivered to me.
Yeah, that is that. I want to quickly talk about this decentralization, right? I don't know if you've already answered this. I'm getting my head around kind of how you explained this, but what do you think is what's the driving force behind this decentralization? You described it pretty well, but what's causing it?
Yeah, it's a good question. My view is it is better for individuals. So it is the mechanism that will again begin to value the individual. So if we think about like where is the value today, it sits in the network, it sits in the organization. So like, what are the highest valued things today? It's like, okay, it's like Facebook, or it's Amazon. It's these big organizations, right? And it's like, oh, because they're holding a whole lot of it's like the power of all of those individuals, I suppose, inside it, and their products and all that stuff. And it's like, it's all about the organization. So me as an individual, I'm pretty disempowered, actually. I like really have no real ability to go in and compete, head to head with an organization. You know what I mean? And so if I had to compete, I'd have to create an organization. I'd have to go and create all of this kind of, and I'd have to go and build more power. So I see that the push for it's like such an interesting question, because it's like who's pushing it and who's it going to benefit? It is actually the real question, because it doesn't benefit the organization. The organization is again this vehicle of trust, right? And we're saying, in fact, the new world will not require the need to have the externalization of trust. We won't have to have that. So from a brand trust, and this is interesting for you because, or it's interesting to speak to you about it because you build brands, right? And brands and trust are like very connected, right? People are not going to transact with some new entity until they like potentially end up trusting that brand, right? And it's like, for me, interestingly, into the future, that will become less important. I'll be able to transact based on this other thing between me and that brand. I don't actually give a shit about that brand. I just want something from them. But we can equally both put our faith in this thing between us to say, yes, we can trust this other vehicle that I know I'm going to put $50 in this. You're going to put your cell phone in this thing, and I'll get what I want at the end of the day. I don't have to have any trust in you that you're going to deliver me my goods, because we know that this thing is unmanipulatable. Once the phone is in there and the money is in there, it's going to swap those things and pass them out. It's like, I don't care who puts the phone in there. You know what I mean? I just want the cheapest phone. You know what I mean? And so interestingly, who does that benefit? It ends up benefiting because obviously it benefits me as an individual, but it also benefits the counterparty because they can also be an individual. So it empowers the individual on the other side of that transaction who previously had no ability to create trust in their own name.
I just want to write that down. That's really cool. I'm already picking up, there's like a very interesting relationship, I think, between cost and value as one part of it, friction, and then trust. Like there's a very interesting triangle between those three things.
Yeah.
The less trust we have, the more friction gets built into the process, the more value gets like eroded.
Yeah.
It's super interesting dynamic happening there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that for me is like a race to zero. That will be driven to zero. So you can look at companies today, they call them like, it could be called asset finance or trade finance is an interesting domain. And maybe you've dealt with those kinds of companies, but what do? They effectively, so it's like I've got, let's imagine that this is how they work, right? So I will go to whoever, I'll go to Builders Warehouse and I'll say, as Tom, I'll say, hey, I can supply you with 100 bricks. You know what I mean? So Builders Warehouse want to buy some bricks and I go, cool, I can supply those bricks. And they'll give me an order for those bricks. So on there, say 100 bricks sold at 10 Rand a brick, right? And I'll go, great. Okay, they've placed an order. I've got terms against my order. I need to deliver them in 60 days or something, right? And then they'll pay me. They'll only want to pay me on delivery of the bricks. Perfect.
Yeah.
So all I've got with me is an order for bricks. Now I have to go and source those bricks from somewhere, right? I don't have the bricks because I'm starting at zero. I don't have the bricks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to phone my buddy who is in Midrand and I'll say, hey, how much are bricks? And he'll say, no, they're 5 Rand each, right? So I'll go, great. Can I place an order for 100 bricks at 5 Rand each? And he'll say none of us trust each other, right? That's why Builders Warehouse didn't pay me the money. They just signed the order. They said, cool, as soon as you got the bricks, we'll pay you. We don't trust you, but here's a piece of paper. And it's like, okay, cool. And I don't trust the company in Midrand, nor do they trust me. So they're saying, listen, we can sell you the bricks at 5 Rand each, but you're going to have to pay us when you collect them. And I go, oh shit, I don't have like the 50 Rand or the 500 Rand that I need to buy those bricks. So what do I do, right? And so there are companies called asset finance or trade finance companies where they'll say, okay, cool. We know that this is obviously a common problem in the supply chain, that Tom needs actually the money upfront to buy the stuff before he sells them. And so what they do is they try and reverse that process. And they say, well, if you've got an order placed with the Midrand company and you've got an order placed with you, and those things come together, a trade finance company will say, cool, we will buy these invoices from you. And they'll discount them. So they'll say, we'll buy that at 80%. So we know you're going to make $500 profit on this thing. We're going to buy your $500 and we're going to pay you $400.
Yeah.
It. So effectively, they'll loan me the money. They don't loan it ever to me. They actually pay that guy directly and they actually buy my order from Builders Warehouse. So they effectively end up brokering the deal. They just pay me the difference. So they're just buying 20% of my profit by forward funding the money, right? And so that's called, I mean, there's a whole industry built on trade and asset finance. And it's complicated because what are they doing? They're themselves also saying, yeah, but we don't know, do we trust Builders Warehouse? So they end up like figuring out, can they trust Builders Warehouse? They also end up figuring out, can they trust the Midrand company? They don't give a shit about Tom. They don't care. They don't care anything about me. They just want to buy my invoice. But they've got to make sure that these oaks can deliver the right product to these oaks down here because that's what it's based on. And so they're buying that and so they make a premium, from that. They make 20% off of the deal. And all they're doing is they're just putting the money forward for 60 days and then they make 20% on that thing. So it's like a really good business. So they are literally buying, they are invested in an economy which has no trust built into it. Does that make sense? And so when you talk about like, and of course those companies themselves are competitive with each other. And so how do they compete? They compete by driving down the price of that margin. Company A is charging 20%, company B charges 18%. Who am I going to pick? I'm going to pick company B, right? And it's like, what value do they provide? It's kind of this trust thing, right? It's very difficult. So you can imagine, if you're an economist, that really the value that they're providing just needs to beat interest on money for 60 days. And once we can get it there, we've got what we call efficiency, right? So it would be efficient if it was the same cost as money for 60 days, which I could have gone and borrowed from the bank, right? But the bank's not going to loan me money based on an invoice. They're going to say, no, like we have no faith in that invoice. So that's why these guys exist. So you can see the value of trust is actually diminishing.
Yes.
I might be in reverse, so maybe that way. So over time, we do expect from an economic perspective for that to diminish. We eventually want this to be completely efficient, because then the guy in the middle, who's now an individual, and the person without the money, has this ability to transact almost perfectly between two untrusted parties, if that makes sense, without having to give up the 20%. Like, that's what we want, right? At the end, or that's what I want as an individual. That's what I want. Maybe as if I was the owner of a bank, I would see that as a threat.
Yes.
So definitely, like for me, like this thing that we've talked about for the first 37 minutes, this decentralized economy, and this is not, it is technology. Like, let's be clear, this is not like a business process change. This thing is 100% based on technology. That contracting thing that we are going to put our trust into is based on technology, cryptography, mathematics, etc., and on something called consensus. So consent. Like, we can have faith. So it's like, well, so here's an interesting one: is how do you pick up what would you call it, like dishonesty, I suppose, between two individuals, right? And there's no mathematical way to know, right? Because maths doesn't know what the truth is. So if I had to say to you, what color is the sky, and we had to both answer that, and you said it was green and I said it was blue, and we would go, okay, well, we disagree. So which one is correct, right? And so like one of us is being dishonest. If we're both perfectly can see, if we both have the same genetic eyeballs or whatever, and we both have the same background, we both know what blue and green are, it's like one of us would be lying, right? And because there's a disagreement between these two things. And so it could be for malicious reasons. Let's assume it's for malicious reasons. We've put a bet together. There's $100. We're both going to bet $100. Sky is blue, sky is green, right? So what is the best way to figure out who's right? And because maths doesn't know, science, maybe does. I suppose science does know. Let's ignore that. But maths certainly doesn't. There's no like perfect way to know the answer, because you could go and fetch a book which says, actually no, the sky is green, and I could fetch a book which says, well, the sky is blue, and we'd go, okay, shit. So like, the book can also lie, right? So there are other actors who could also support the lie, and like the earth is flat, the earth is round, right? So it's like, well, how do we know what is the truth, right? And who wins the bet? And so the answer in this decentralized economy, because this is really fundamental to it, is consensus. So it's like, well, the answer is, let's go and ask 5,000 people what they believe, and then if 90% of them say it's blue and 10% say it's green, you know what? It's like most likely that the sky's blue. Do you know what I mean? So that's what the decentralized economy is based on, consensus. But it's based on consensus with a loss involved in it as well. So every time, so if you imagine these 5,000 people that we went and asked this question, we said to them, listen, we need you to answer what you feel, the sky is blue or the sky is green. We want you to put R1 on the line. And if you are if it turns out that more than 51% of people answer in your favor, you'll get your R1 back with 10 cents added. We're going to give you 10 cents on that. So like, you've got to put something at stake. These 5,000 people are not just randomly answered. They put something at stake. They said, no, we think it's blue, and we're going to put R1 into it. And if it turns out everyone votes for blue, or more than 50% vote for blue, we'll get our R1 back plus like 10 cents. So it's like, oh, that's a great game. This is a good game. I'll play this game all day with you, right? I just have to answer, and I have to just bet on what I think the consensus of the answer will be. And ideally, that's probably the truth, right? Most people, I think, are going to generally answer the truth. So you're going to bet generally on the truth. So in fact, consensus with staking in it will tend towards the truth. That's an interesting fundamental piece of maths, actually. And so, and it's game theory, I suppose.
Yeah,
But
I was just thinking,
Yeah.
you're trying to codify the truth.
Yes,
Like,
correct.
it's a very, very meta kind of high concept idea.
Yeah.
But super, super interesting.
So that is the fundamental of Bitcoin. That is it. Like fundamentally, the faith in Bitcoin is based on the fact that people put at stake something and they all are voting against what they believe is the truth. If they are found to be manipulating the truth, i.e. the majority vote is different to your vote, you lose something in it. If you are found to be in the majority, you gain something. So it's like, oh, okay, well then I'll vote for the majority. I mean, that makes sense, right? If someone says Sky is 1 + 1 = 2 or is 1 + 1 = 3, I'm going to say most people are going to say it's 2, right? And why would I say it's 3? It would be stupid. I'm probably going to lose money, right? Unless I was trying to manipulate the system, but then I have to go and manipulate 51% of the network. I have to go and convince 50% of the network, hey guys, let's vote wrong on the next one. And it's like, well, that's infeasible. How are you going to do that? Especially when it's a global network and people are all over the world, all voting. It's like it becomes impossible. It becomes even impossible for a state actor. So a state actor could be the USA or Russia or China or South Africa. Even they can't manipulate this thing because they don't really have the ability to tap into people all over the globe and change the fact that they're going to vote, change their votes. Do you know what I mean? And so Bitcoin fundamentally is built on that. Bitcoin is old technology now, 2009, but it really taught us something about how to create this, like how to build trust. And it's fundamentally underpinned on consensus. If you think about it, it's actually like not so weird to think that this could work. It actually does fucking work. And then you can start to say, well, what else can we do with this thing? And then you're seeing more and more different kinds of technologies being layered on top of it. So it's not layered on top necessarily Bitcoin, but based on this thing called blockchain. So that's blockchain 101 is how that thing works. You can build all sorts of other crazy shit on top of it. You can build the CryptoKitties. You can build applications that run in this blockchain. You can build that contracting thing between us. It doesn't even have to have value in it, but it's like everyone's going to vote for this thing doing the right thing. Cool. We can trust that. We can trust that. So that's for me one very interesting thing. And I think, yes, it talks to payments and it talks to stuff, but it also talks to this ability to start to say, actually, I can empower. It's like almost you can go from this super globalized world now of internet, and you can start to say, like, actually this empowers no longer those big global centralized organizations. It now actually empowers individuals again. It starts to say, you know what, there's this guy Wynand who's on the tip of South Africa who actually you can some guy in China can start using you for whatever it is. I grow pot plants or something, like anything. And you can start to build a business which is now no longer just about you and your neighborhood, but now you can start transacting at a global level without using anyone, without any third party between you. No PayPal, no nothing. It's just like between you and some Okie in China. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's how we're going to get to the global village.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like global, but local. It's like empower local. It's actually weird because is it globalized or is it localized? It's like, no, I think we're enabling the localized, but on a global stage. You know what I mean?
It's almost like it's the wrong question. It's neither.
It's neither, exactly. Because if you think of globalization, you think, oh, Amazon, that's globalization, right? You've got one big fucking centralized organization that can access the globe. It's like, yeah, but it's beyond that. It's like on the other side of that. Past
yeah, but currently we equate globalization with reach.
Yes, yes.
But I think the kind of thing that we're building towards is it can be global without that massive reach.
Yes, exactly.
Like you said, it's me selling my homemade pot plant succulent holder to one guy in China.
How cool is that, right?
I don't need Alibaba. I don't need all of this infrastructure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How cool is that? So so there's something else. It's past this word globalization, and it's past this big fucking organizational view of the world. It's like, no, that there's no organization. We don't need Amazon anymore. It's just like individuals, just a network of individuals who all can. And so then you, as an entrepreneurial spirit, it's like actually like jobs are become. It starts to impact jobs. It's like, well, how do I work now? Because I used to work for a company, and they used to do the stuff, but actually, what is the value of the company? In fact, it's just the network of people inside it. Well, do we need the company anymore? Because we can retain the network of people, but we don't need the company around it. In fact, I can go back to like pure individual. It's like, actually, my skills are to do XYZ. Can I be paid for those skills directly? And I don't need an organization to broker this anymore.
Got it.
So it's like even work starts to disappear. And then you start to say, well, there's side hustles. And like, if you look into Africa, it's like 100%. Everyone's got 3 jobs, right? You've ever been to Kenya? Everyone you meet there who works for a corporate has got like, during the day, they're a project manager, but at night they sell like stuff on the road, or they have 3 investments in different in a tuk-tuk company, and it's like amazing, right? That's what we want, actually. So it's like the world going back there, which is like, you as a human, you have these values and this is what you want to do. How do you monetize it, and how do you keep a good life and be paid for it? Absolutely. But you can't do this in today's world. Today's world says you need to have a salary, you need to earn a thing, you have to pay tax on that salary. Any other income, it's like, well, you got to declare it. Even your employer says you can't have another income, and it's like bullshit, actually, garbage. That's because of the organization. It's like, no, I think we must get rid of that, actually. It's interesting because that's me as an individual speaking, but then as a director and like founder of a technology company, it's like, well, okay, so in that view, it's like, well, how does that impact us?
How do you?
Interesting.
Well, that's actually a nice segue into the next question. We're still chatting about the tech stuff, but
so I didn't answer your big 3 though. I didn't. So yes, blockchain and the decentralized economy, but it's not just blockchain. Like, if you end up saying Tom says blockchain, it's like you are wrong. It's not that. That's one small piece. For me, it's like the big technology impact, decentralized economics. And is that technology? Yeah, I think it is. But like, I think it's more fundamental than that. It's like a change in how we see value. So that's like number one.
No, I get it. Like, it's not lost on me. It's a change. Yeah. It's a multidimensional change. Like, it's a massive perspective. Like, I hate using things like paradigm shift. Like, it's such a wank word, but
it is.
It is.
Yeah. It is. It's a fundamental. Yeah. It's actually like the Africanization of the world. Isn't that cool, actually?
Yeah, that is actually. You'd make a pretty good marketer. That's a good way to position this. Look, let's quickly chat about, like, let's assume we are heading in this direction. It's all going to, like, increasingly, and I do think the economy has already started decentralizing. This is not something that's going to come. We're already starting to see the fragmentation pieces break up, and like, we're already in this. Which skills do you think will be required for a company to succeed in this kind of economy? Again, it's a bit of a journalist question.
Yeah, and also they're completely at odds with each other, right? So in the economy where there are no organizations, how do organizations succeed? Well, they don't, right? So what does succeed, I suppose, is the sort of, I suppose, what would you call them? The collectives that put together the contracts, right? Or that build the mechanisms to on-ramp and off-ramp from this distributed world. You know what I mean? So like, there's still big issues that are not fixed by software. So like the delivery of your shoes that you bought on Takealot, like, they can't email the shoes to you, right? They're not digital. So we're solving this in a digital way, yes, and it works brilliantly for digital goods, but does it work for physical goods? And it's like, well, no, not really. It doesn't. Like, I can't really put shoes inside a smart contract and have them be, given to you somehow, like what, through your screen or something, or 3D printed for you or something. So it works for digital goods, absolutely. And I think we must take it to the end degree, the end with digital stuff. It's 100%. We're going to go there. So so when I talk about the on ramps and off ramps to these contracts, it's like, of course, when this contract says, hey, it's time for me to deliver sneakers to Wynand. It's like, well, who's going to do that? The contract can't do it, right? And so that's an off ramp from this contract, or the on ramp is the alternate. Is like someone maybe needs to escrow those shoes and provide some kind of escrow agreement or something. I don't know. So it's like potentially those are those are like, and let me be clear that today those things are not being solved in the world of Ethereum or in Cardano or in this blockchain world. It's like where things become physical is like, oh, well, how does that work? We still need someone we trust. And it's like, oh, shit, that's a fuck up, because we're trying to build something which requires nobody from a trust perspective. And now you're saying we still need someone to deliver sneakers. Do we trust them? Well, we kind of have to, right? And so I suppose that there's a whole lot of things going, like trying to be built around how you can do this kind of stuff. But like fundamentally, are we ever going to make that perfect? I would say no, probably not. So at the local end of things, you still have this off ramp and on ramp. But this is if you're talking about the distributed economy, right? There is a redefinition of organization though that I think is interesting to talk about. So there is something called like, what would you would call them? Distributed autonomous organizations, which is where you can have shares in these contracts. And because the contracts don't have to be as minor as I'm selling you a pair of shoes, they could be really big. Like it could be like, hey, I'm trying to raise funds. Tom, I'm trying to raise like $1 million because I've got an idea to start a sneaker factory, right? So I can go to the distributed world and I can say, hey guys, here's a contract. In this contract, here's my proposal. I plan on buying this property. I plan on buying this machine. Here's some of my prior work. You know who I am. I would like to raise $1 million. And I can go and put this on the internet. And then individuals can fund it. Like you can put $100 in and someone else can put $50 in. In fact, I could crowd fund this entire thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is what like ICOs are all about. They're raising funds in order to do something. So fundamentally, at the end of the day, what do you have? So once this thing is funded and we've got $1 million raised here in this thing, what do we end up with? Those $1 million don't belong to me because I had the idea. No, actually, there are shares issued in this thing given back to everyone who contributed. So you put $100 in, you get 100 shares. Another one put $50 in, he gets 50 shares in this thing. I might myself in the contract say, actually, like, even though I'm not putting any money in, I would like 30% of the shares because, it's my idea and I'll be running it and I need to be paid a salary or whatever, right? And I would have encoded this. So when you invested, you knew all the terms of this contract and you got your shares out. So it's like you can consider this thing now as like an entire organization. Because if you think about it, it's you and all the other crowdsourced investors have created a brand new entity. And in fact, it's got nothing to do with a company, right? But it is still an organization. And within that thing, we can start voting. So I might go and build those machines and I might say, in a year's time, I might go, fuck, you know what? I've got this opportunity where we can now pivot the business to go and do something else. Maybe we want to start a branch in Singapore or Australia, right? And I might go, you know what? That's a big enough question that this should be raised to the board. I would go and raise that question in the contract and it would say, hey, all investors that are invested, what do you guys think? And you've got different voting rights and you can vote Singapore, Australia. So you can be part of the decision making of that entity going forward by virtue of the fact that you have shares in it, right? The same way that the JSE kind of works, doesn't really work like that, but sort of. And at the end of the day, we've got an organization that is autonomous, yes, so it makes its own decisions, but of course those are input by decisions made by all the shareholders in it, which are just those people who crowdfunded it in the beginning. So it's like, well, isn't that actually an organization? Yes, it is, 100%. And so you can invest in 1,000 of these things. So in fact, you can belong to 1,000 different organizations. And what you are doing is you're just inputting your skill and your capability into each of those 1,000 organizations. And so we flipped it around. It's like no longer the organization down to the individual. We've got the individual at the top and 1,000 organizations down at the bottom. It's like, it's so brilliantly awesome. It's like, that's the future.
Amazing. That's a super interesting idea. Like that inverting that power dynamic completely.
Totally. Yeah, totally.